We've actually been pretty spoiled. In 2023, it's been a pretty decent year for gaming so far. It's been jam-packed with games like Hogwarts Legacy, Tears of a Kingdom and Final Fantasy 16, as well as some really incredible remakes in the likes of Dead Space and Resident Evil 4. But, and this is a pretty big stinky but, in mentioning all the good games, there have also been some decidedly average to even poor PC ports, such as Last of Us Part 1 on PC, and then more recently, the absolutely broken Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Regardless of how much quality, or even the lack thereof, is on offer at any given point in time, you can always find yourself bored without something to play. Being a person that admittedly spends way too much of his time gaming, I quite often run out of things to play. For this very reason, I've been revisiting older games, and I'm not talking about games from a year or two back, but rather games from the ancient times. Games from before 2015. Games that I either haven't played in ages, or better yet, haven't played ever. Tomb Raider is the second older game I've revisited in the last week, and it's a great example of why you don't always have to play the latest or even the greatest to have a good, fun gaming experience. In fact, I'd almost venture to say that you could actually have more fun playing this game than with the majority of the titles being released currently. Saying all this, you've clicked on this video to hear my thoughts on Tomb Raider, so let's get to it. To be honest, I'm still pretty new to the whole video essay or retrospective take or retrospective review thing, so guys, please bear with me on this. The whole point of me doing this retrospective is A, because you guys voted for Tomb Raider, and B, for me to highlight a few elements that I really enjoyed about this game, which are pretty much going to be the majority of the talking points, whilst also pointing to the elements that I wasn't really too fond of. Admittedly, which don't really account to much, but they still have to be mentioned nonetheless to be more or less objective. Is Tomb Raider still fun in 2023? Is Tomb Raider worth your time in 2023? Let's find out. Having only completed Tomb Raider last night, I'm left with the undeniable conclusion that replaying this game is every bit as enjoyable as it was 10 years ago when it first released. Yes, the visuals, whilst being technically less impressive than the two latter entries in the franchise, namely Rise of the Tomb Raider and Shadow of the Tomb Raider respectively, still look pretty fantastic to this very day. In actual fact, in certain cases, I actually prefer certain visual elements of the first entry. The thing that I find to be so impressive about Tomb Raider 2013 is just how the devs used the colors and the contrast to reimagine Lara and her environment on this hostile yet beautiful little island. Colors are bright, but more than that, they're incredibly rich. And I'll use this clip of Lara on the beach to point out sort of what I mean. Now look at the moonlight reflecting off Lara's gun, as well as the soft glow coming from her skin. And then look at the campfire reflecting off Lara's wet and shiny clothes. Whereas this doesn't fully illustrate what I mean. In short, I just find this art style to be incredibly impressive as well as quite satisfying. Now earlier I mentioned that Rise of the Tomb Raider had a much improved graphic system objectively, but I was kind of turned off by the toned down palette due to the game being set in a snowy mountain range somewhere in Northern Europe. It was just less warm and less inviting, obviously. The original Tomb Raider was and is just such more of a vibrant game. I find it to be the best setting of the trilogy. The little remote Japanese island of Yamatai offers you just about all four seasons from scene to scene. Sun, rain, snow and beaches. It's all there, baby. Hands down, the most enjoyable game mechanic has to be the combat system. I had such a blast upgrading all my weapons, then mowing down scores and scores of enemies, then doing it some more on repeat. Now in recent years, I kind of forgot about the first entry, mostly playing Rise and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Whereas Rise of the Tomb Raider has a decent combat system for sure, and plenty of it at that, Shadow of the Tomb Raider was so combat starved it's not even funny. Upon replaying Tomb Raider 2013, I have to say it did the combat the best in the trilogy. At its core, Tomb Raider is a cover shooter, but playing the game like this whilst being the safer option can become quite cumbersome and boring. By constantly keeping on the move and using a mixture of your weaponry interchangeably, this game becomes so much fun and opens up beautifully. The big combat arenas are very, and I stress, very enjoyable. Combat arenas are set up at the end of one section, transitioning into the next. Notable ones are at the top of the mountain just before getting to the signal beacon to radio for help, as well as Shanty Town is an absolute blast. But hands down the best and most enjoyable one has to be the one I recorded here against the bulk of Queen Himiko's Storm Guard. Platforming is simple, but like most other mechanics in this game, a hell of a lot of fun. Standout areas that are an absolute treat are climbing the signal tower where Lara contacts emergency support, which at the time she thought would be a med evac. The combat and traversal through the shanty town before and after being captured by the island survivors. The beach area where Lara reunites with the rest of her crew. And my absolute favorite, her journey up towards Queen Himiko's stronghold as depicted in this video. Once you unlock the rope ascending ability, it is just too much fun. This is definitely not a horror game, but it does have some horror elements, dark undertones and heavy story beats, but it's never aggressive enough to make you feel uncomfortable. This is a tough island, the survivors have had to endure and do some inhumane things to survive, and more importantly, in their attempts to escape, which always seems to be at hand, but just never quite succeeds. Another pro is the fact that it's a semi-open world, but it's very linear in its approach. With open world, hub-like areas, this formats allow the game to feel spacious enough to breathe, but not too overwhelming with Ubisoft level map markers. There had to be a few of these, but they are minor at that. The fact that there isn't a sprint button isn't something I'm too keen of. Both the games that followed added sprint, which just works so much better in my opinion. Quite often I press shift expecting to sprint only to do a dodge roll. But then again, this isn't a map on the scale of Rise or Shadow of the Tomb Raider. The world isn't massive in the slightest, so I can kinda understand the decision to a certain degree. Whether or not it is due to that fact, who knows. But it's stomachable. And then the last con is probably the fact that 90% of the main campaign of Tomb Raider is pretty good and pretty solid, whereas I find the ending, or should I say the final boss fight, to be a bit on the shit side. Funnily enough, with Rise of the Tomb Raider, I find majority of the main campaign to be rather bland, but then the last 30% of the main campaign actually progressively building up to a pretty decent boss fight in the end. In ending, did I enjoy my time with Tomb Raider? You bet your ass I did. Is it worth your time in 2023? You better believe it. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button. If you have any questions, please hit me up in the comment section. And as always, if you're still watching and you haven't subscribed as of yet, now's the time to do so. It's the end of the weekend. It's people like you. Have a good night. Cheers.